Hello and welcome to Book Lust. I'm Nancy Pearl. My guest today at University Bookstore is author Stephenie Meyer, whose trilogy of teen novels has just been a phenomenon. Stephenie, thank you so much for stopping by today.
Thank you for having me, Nancy.
You're welcome. Well, I have many questions to ask you and many things that I'd love to discuss with you, but let's start with a question that I know you get all the time.
Okay.
We'll just get that out of the way and then go on to other things. So, what's a nice Mormon girl like you writing about vampires?
I don't get that one as often as I thought I would.
Really?
I think that when people read the books, I got that question more when people heard about them, but when they read them, they understand. Because I think my vampires completely fit in with who I am and my background and everything. They're very expected from me. Whereas when you first hear vampires, a lot of my friends kind of are like, oh, really?
Quite an active imagination you have, they must have
Yeah,
thought.
well, I think they thought there was something really dark inside me that I just hadn't been telling them about.
So, how did you get started? What was the genesis for these books?
And that is when I do get all the time. And it's a little bit hard. It's kind of, I always feel cheesy answering this, but honestly, it was because of a dream that I had. I wasn't writing at the time or dreaming of writing, and I had this dream, and it was Edward and Bella in the Meadow. It's the 13th chapter of Twilight, and I woke up from it, and it had given me so much. I mean, I had Edward's character, the sparkly vampire, kind of his whole mindset, and I didn't want to forget about it, but I have 3 children, and I forget a lot of things. So I typed it out on the computer. And that was really, it wasn't the dream so much as that experience of writing it down that turned me into a writer, because I loved it. To be able to take something that was just, impressions and colors the way dreams are, and turn it into something concrete that I could revisit over and over again. It was an amazingly exciting experience, and so I was kind of hooked from that point on.
And did you think ever, well, let me back up a step. Were you a big reader?
Yes, that is how I've always thought of myself. I've never thought of myself as a writer, but I am a reader, and since I was a little kid, that was, I came from a family with a lot of kids. There were 6 of us, and my title, I was the reader. I was the one that you never saw without a big fat book in my hand.
And what were some of those books that you read as a child that might have influenced you consciously or unconsciously?
I read a lot of Jane Austen, and I read Louisa May Alcott. Oh, I don't know how many times I've read Little Women.
And did you identify with Jo?
Oh, yes. I was Jo. Well, my big sister's the pretty one. My little sister's the imaginative one. So I felt like I was just Jo to a T. Anne Shirley and I got along really well. The first adult book I ever read, though, was The Sword of Shannara. That's what started me when I was 7 years old. My dad was reading that to us at night, and he would stop at the most exciting places. So I would sneak into his closet during the day and read it. And so I never really had that transition from kids' books to adult books. I never realized that I wasn't supposed to be reading the great big fat ones.
Right.
So I just went straight into that when I was young.
And fantasy was always a favorite of yours? Because Terry Brooks, the Shannara books.
My dad was really into science fiction and fantasy, and I tended to read the books. My mom's books were the Austens, and then my dad's books were the Orson Scott Cards and the Terry Brooks, and so I read them both.
And is Ender's Game one of your favorite books?
It is. Speaker for the Dead, the sequel, is actually my very favorite. I accidentally read them out of order and read Speaker for the Dead first, and that was my first experience with Orson Scott Card, and it was really one of those life-changing books, which is odd with science fiction, but he writes such amazingly true themes that it's more than that.
Now, we'll get back to your books because I want to talk about those, but let's just talk about Orson Scott Card for a moment, just because do you find that his Alvin Maker series was as rewarding to you or as the Ender's Game or Speaker for the Dead series was?
At first, there were some characters that I really loved. I didn't identify with it quite as much as with Ender's Game. But towards the end of the series, I got a little lost. But in the beginning, I loved his next. I loved the way he rewrote American history, Benjamin Franklin's role and everything. I loved how clever all of that was.
So characters were always really important to you.
Yes, characters have always been why I read and why I write.
And why you write. And so that transition from reader to writer, were there vampire books? I mean, the sort of canonic vampire books.
No, there were no vampire books.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I read one Anne Rice when I was in college, just because they were really popular then.
Everybody did, right.
Well, I think I read 2, and I liked The Witch one a lot better. But I've never seen a vampire movie. I've seen pieces on TV, but never I've never gone out and seen one or seen a whole one. Never watched an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm not into horror at all.
Yeah.
It's always been kind of a turnoff for me. You know, where science fiction and fantasy, I was intrigued with. Horror, immediately, no.
Right.
Never read Stephen King, just because I know I'd, you know, probably wet my pants or something. I'm not a huge chicken. So vampires really were not a part of my life at all. So I really, now they're so much a part of my life. It's very odd.
Right. Now, what do your children think of, how old are your children?
My children are now 10, 7, and 5. And they're kind of funny. My oldest...
Is it a girl?
No, all boys.
All
I have
boys.
all boys.
Oh.
Would have liked a girl. I mean, they're really great boys, but I kind of miss all the pink frilly things.
My daughter has 3 daughters, three girls, so I think she would have liked a boy at some time. But
you have to be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I thought I wanted to do it just like Joe March, you know, and have Joe's boys and everything.
Right.
And then when I was older, I wanted all girls, and I got my first wish. But my oldest son is really, he's very blasé around me, you know, very whatever. But at school, I hear that he gets really excited. And they just passed around the Scholastic Book Fair things, and he's in a brand new school and doesn't know anybody, and he held up, "That's my mom." His teachers just told me at parent orientation night, and that was, he doesn't ever show me that side. And then my 2 younger kids, you know, I'm mom.
Right.
I'm totally normal. And
Right.
the story that I think shows really well kind of how they view things. My 7-year-old, when he was 5, he has a little bit of a speech impediment, so I have to translate for him. And he was trying to ask another little boy his age a question, and so I, you know, what are you trying to ask? And he was trying to ask him, which book does your mom write? Because of course,
he thinks all moms,
yes,
right,
all moms must be exactly the same.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Given your own experiences as sort of a huge reader as a kid and a teenager, what do you think accounts for the just that wonderful outpouring of love of your books? And it's just amazing to sort of wander around a teen section in a library or a bookstore. I was just here the other day and looking in the teen section, fantasy section, and there was a boy standing there and picking up Twilight, and I thought, that is so interesting, you know. And he said, well, he'd heard of the book, and you know, he was really intrigued by it. So what do you think, what is it? Is there something lacking in today's world that draws teens, do you think, to fantasy, and particularly yours?
You know, I don't really know. I'm still trying to figure out what it is that accounts for the people screaming and the signs and the T-shirts, which are all things that I would have never thought to dream of, even if I thought the books had been would be successful. The only things my guesses, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that it's because I take the characters very seriously. To me, they aren't characters in a book. To me, they're real people, and they're very well rounded in my head. And when my editors and I have a difference of opinion, I'll take their opinion on most things. But if it's something that is character matter, those cannot be changed. They are who they are. And so, I don't know, there's no joke to it for me. They are who they are, and I think teenage readers appreciate that, because a lot of the characters that they deal with are very stock, you know, sort of cutouts. And I think some of it is Bella, because she is human and she has no magical powers, and she didn't ever receive any kung fu training at some point that makes her a superhero, and she's never going to be the chosen one who everyone's been waiting for millennium. And I've read several really good YA books recently where all the characters were born unbeknownst to them, they were the chosen ones. And I think that's a really lovely fantasy that we all like, but at the same time, sometimes it's nice to relax back with someone who isn't special and has special things happening around her, but it's not because she can do anything neat. And that I identify with it, because I know that if I were attacked in an alley, I wouldn't suddenly be able to beat the crap out of everybody. I would probably lose that fight. So I think it's relaxing sometimes to have a character who doesn't have to be anything other than what she just is.